Really appreciate you taking the time of the day. I know everybody's time is valuable. Today we're going to be reviewing who is selling your products, and if anybody's ever listened to any of the webinar series that I've done in my career, I've been doing this for roughly about 17 years now, you've known that I've always talked about any type of brand protection strategy. You need to look at the who, what, where, when, why, and how your products are being sold or offered online. Who's doing it, and today we're going to kind of review that through online marketplaces and give you the best practices and the best tools to conduct some of these investigations yourself. And when you obviously need that next level, myself or Denise, who I'll introduce here in a second, will be here to answer those questions as we move forward. So moving on, again, my name is David Howell. I joined Vorys within this last year as a Director of Brand Protection, and I have Denise Mosteller with me, who's the Online Brand Protection Manager for Implus. But I've known Denise for quite a few years, a little bit longer, and she has been doing this online investigation research for well over 20 years. So thank you for joining us, Denise. I really do appreciate taking the time.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
So Denise actually, bless her heart, made the trip to come up and join us in Columbus, so we are all in the same room. So again, we are working through technology today, and technology, just like anything else, has its own inherent problems. So we'll try to go through this, and if anybody has any issues, please type them in the Q&A, and we'll try to address those as we move forward. So again, thank you, Denise, and let's kind of jump right in and talk a little bit about why we even need to worry about these investigations and what we're looking for, and then we'll jump into some of the investigations right off. So just a little bit about Vorys, Seymour and Pease, just so everybody knows. We're a fairly large law firm based in Columbus. We have offices around the country. We were established in 1909. We have about 375 attorneys, and that does change. We're one of the 200 largest law firms in the United States, but more importantly, we're a go-to firm for 23 of the Fortune 500 companies, amongst just many other companies that we work from. We have many areas of practice. The group that I work in, and the group that we'll be discussing things today, is our online unauthorized seller enforcement group. So through a lot of thought leadership, a lot of different things that we do with this, we have a very diverse team, and that's one of the reasons why I'm here, bringing a different added value to what this whole group is actually trying to solve, these problems for a lot of these brands and companies that are out there. Because in the end, it's not about anything other than growing your business and growing your sales and protecting it, and that's really what we're going to talk about today. So let's just dive right into a few of the statistics, if you will, and I'm not a big fan of stats, but let's jump in to talk about a little bit of this. So what is marketplace, or what is happening out there? This is no news to anybody that's out there. It is increasingly growing. There's a few numbers that I would like to just leave everybody with today, that this year alone, in 2017, we're going to see 6,375, as it's noted today, brick-and-mortar retail stores that are going to be closing their doors. And what's that really mean? It's shifting the sales from those brick-and-mortar onto online marketplaces, and we see that today, so that's not really shocking. But there's been a demographic that maybe, a little bit of an assumption here, that's been holding out or not embracing the online sales or online marketplace. But these stores, these underperforming stores that may be closing down, what's happening is that last bit of demographic is now going to be pushed to buy those goods and services that they did in those closing stores, now to move them more online. So what does that do? It's going to start seeing this growth increase. So we steadily see it, 10, 15, 20% growth. Different numbers show different statistics. So what's really going to say for 2017 when we finish up this holiday season coming up, or even beyond? And that's really what we want to take a look at. The more sales, the more traffic, the more we're going to need to really go out there and actively monitor and protect the brands and the sales of those. So what are the sources of unauthorized sellers? You have unauthorized distributors. How are they getting these products? So a lot of companies will have a 1, 2, or 3-step distribution, and maybe there's other entities that are acquiring this product, or it's being diverted. You have professional resellers. There's a lot of companies out there, in my experience in some of these very large marketplaces, There's large sellers that are acquiring these products. They're professional resellers, and they're acquiring this. There's one-off sellers. There's the one that just acquired a box of something, or they saw a sale and they went and grabbed that product and they're selling it online. There's schemes that are out there, credit card thieves that are out there. There's all types of issues of these third-party or unauthorized sellers. And here's what we really want to take a look at is you look at this slide and you see that, you can look at that plane, aerobatics, kind of a death spiral is what we're really looking at here, because it's important to understand that when you have these unauthorized sales or third-party sales out there, there's a few things that really start to happen. You have price erosion. So now you start having these products being sold at a lower price than what you want them. And that starts to lead into consumer confidence issues. Because then you start looking at how is there so many offerings from a price deviation of 30, 40, 50, 60%. Then you get this consumer confidence. It's very hard once you start losing consumer confidence to build that back up. And that's one of the things that we really want to look at. So as prices drop, we start looking at these things, and really that's what we're going to talk about today here in a second. What's important that I'm just going to kind of skip this slide as everybody looks, and everybody will get this slide afterwards, but I want to show this slide because this is what's really important as we're going through this. If you heard me speak before, whether I coined the term or I've really been preaching it for a very long time, I've always talked about the 3 pillars of brand protection. You had to have a good monitoring solution, a good investigation research solution, and a good enforcement strategy. Well, since I've joined Vorys, I've worked very closely with Whitney Gibson, who is one of the partners and the lead partner over this area of practice, who's really changed my thought process. There's really 4 pillars of this. So if you remove those 3 that I talked about, the first pillar should be really good, proper legal foundation for enforcement. And what is that? That's really putting these policies, these reseller agreements, whatever those types of things, depending on what your business model is, having that good policy and talking about how, the who, what, where, when, why, and how you're allowed to sell that product online. Now you're in a position to monitor for those unauthorized sellers, research and investigate, which is what we're going to talk about here in just a moment, but now you have legal grounds for enforcement. And some of those legal grounds for enforcement we're going to dive into here in a second, kind of give you an idea. So like determining the strength of your legal. This talks about material difference. So I don't have a slide really discussing this, but a lot of times these unauthorized sellers will go to the first sale doctrine, and that's how they're justifying their ability to sell and offer your products. Well, material difference, we can come in, evaluate your reseller agreements, your policies, your products, and try to work with you to put a material difference argument. Now, a lot of times people look at material difference and think it's a physical material difference, whether it's a packaging issue or it looks a little bit different or somebody scratched off the logo. And those things are material difference, but what about looking at what guarantees you have? So the courts have actually determined that a material difference does not have to be a physical one. And there's, I think, 70-plus cases that have ruled in favor that not only does it not have to be a physical material difference, but you only need to prove one material difference. So what are some of those material differences? So we talked about guarantees, maybe warranties. What type of guarantees do you have? What if those guarantees do not go over to a third-party seller that may be selling your products, right? What about different distributors and retailers? You have a vetting process. So a retailer has to go through a process to become authorized, and if they have not done that, they're not authorized to sell those goods, and that again could be a type of material difference. What are your policies to recall? To, if you have any type of issues where lot numbers or expirations or things like this are popping up there, what type of recourse do you have? And are those in your policies? And these are minor changes that really can kind of triage your existing policy to put these in there. Looking at your customer complaints, customer service, different types you have for servicing those. If they're sold outside the proper channel, those might not be there for you, and that could be deemed a material difference. Some other ones that we can talk about really quickly, they're not slides here, but shipping and storage of products. So when we're talking about a product that may be a type of cream, or it could be a battery, or it could be things that if they're not stored properly, those then are kind of removing that warranty. They're removing that quality that then can be deemed a possible material difference. Okay? So now looking at that enforcement process, so now we're talking about those 4 pillars of brand protection. Okay? So we got the putting the right policies and procedures and reseller agreements in place, and moving that now down to monitoring. How do you monitor for this? There's a lot of technology partners that Vorys works with, very good technology that helps you identify these unauthorized sellers on these marketplaces and auction sites. But then you got to move through the investigation. Again, I keep saying we're going to touch on that in a second, but the enforcement. Now, once you put and you go down this funnel, these are the types of things that are going to now build your enforcement to be successful. If you don't put these things in place, I can't reiterate that enough, you're literally going to play the proverbial whack-a-mole when trying to enforce and really solve these problems that are plaguing you on these online marketplaces. So, uncovering a third-party seller. So what is a third-party seller? I think that's probably one of the biggest questions that either you know or you don't know. Well, you have an authorized seller, which would be someone you have vetted through the process, and they're allowed to have your product and then resell your product. And they're reselling it in a way that's in accordance with your reseller agreements that you may have with them. A third-party seller is somebody who is not, and we'll just kind of be very generically, I think, Denise, that'd be fair to say, they're them, right? Anybody who's not.
Right.
Okay, so now we're really going to start relying a lot on Denise here to really educate all of us on what we're really looking for. So there's a basic steps that you can take, and we're going to show everyone on the call today some basic steps how you can conduct an investigation and what to look for. Okay? Now, after this call and after this webinar today, if you want, we have created 2 documents that we will distribute out. One is we will review each of these, kind of a checklist, if you will, of things you can do and how to go about doing that. And another one is a state secretary registration list that when you do identify some of these, you can actually click that and go to that Secretary of State and run that business entity. Kind of a very useful tool. It took me a while to build that, so I think we want to share that all here, and Vorys want to share that with everybody.
Definitely saves time.
It saves a lot of time. Okay, Denise, now let's get the conversation started. So thank you for bearing with me there for 10 minutes, kind of doing why we're on the call today. So, Denise, now we dive into it. So for today, we removed a lot of kind of the information that really isn't relevant as far as the identities of some of the marketplaces as well as some of the people that we've kind of investigated. But what we want to do today is say the first thing. You come across a marketplace and a seller, what's the first thing you really want to do, Denise? What would be the first logical step?
The first thing that I do is look over their seller page. I look for any type of identifying information, a logo, a phone number, their username. I look at even their description on this one. It's kind of generic, but sometimes people will put some very unique language in their description about their company, and I pay attention to that as well as misspellings, because all of the information that we see here is what we're going to take and use to search on the web and other places.
So that's a good point. I know over the investigations that I've conducted, when you're going through this page just kind of shows you their storefront, if you will, right?
Right.
But a lot of these marketplaces, they'll actually have about us, they'll have shipping policies, they'll have different FAQs, if you will. I found a lot where you're searching this and they say, we collect sales tax in X state, right?
Right, yes. They will list it, or sometimes you find where it's shipped from, and that's all very valuable information because it gives you another basically pointer to them.
It's the breadcrumbs that lead you to that. And that's what's important when you really, first thing is whatever marketplace you're on, whatever auction site you're on, really dive in and look at that store and see. And here's another example. So here, this is an auction site, a little bit different than the last one. But here, you still see the logo. You still see the username. And this is where Denise has educated me even over the years, You know, Denise, when we look at something like this and we see this offering on this auction site, what's really relevant here?
So on this page, you'll see the location. I think this one is Chesapeake, Virginia. And then you'll see the seller information where this, gives the seller's name. You can click on it, and it will go on this page. And then you see the number that's by the seller. You want to click on that as well, because when you click on that, you get to even more information about the seller. And I like the view ID history. That's one of the first places I go to on the auction websites.
And let's take a moment on this, because this is kind of important. It's not just for this auction site. There's a majority of the marketplaces out there will have some level of an ID history. They'll let you know if someone changed names, or there's ways to find that out. A lot of times this is overlooked, because when what I always say, when a bad faith seller out there starts off selling a product, they do so not really thinking whether they're going to be big or someone's going to come looking after them, right, Denise?
That's correct.
And then all of a sudden, oh, I just received a cease and desist letter, or now people are looking at me, and I go and change my name, right?
That's correct. Yes.
So now when you have this piece of information and you look, well, now we see that this individual has changed his name 3 times. And what does this tell you, Denise?
Which I like when they change their name a lot, actually. So when I saw this one, it tells me a couple of things. If you look at the middle user ID name, my first guess is their name is Rick, and they were either born in 45 or they're 45 years old. For me, it gives some identifying information that I can start searching and put different things together. And we also had the city and the state with this one as well. So I have seen ones where people have actually used their first, their last name, and their age, and those ones are great. But when it's something like Goldberg 45 Rick, it's not very common, so it's also something that's great to throw into a web search and see what comes back, because people tend to use their usernames in more than one place. And often those usernames are used with their personal stuff, like on their social media, which I know that we'll get into that. So looking at the different usernames can actually give you a lot of information.
So let's just recap. Just in these 3 slides that we just talked about, we were able to see where he said he's selling in Chesapeake.
Mm-hmm.
We were able to see that he changed his name and where he's at right here, and kind of how long he's been selling and what his feedback rating is. So we can see he's moving a lot of product. He may be 45. His name's maybe Rick. He's in Chesapeake. We're starting to follow those breadcrumbs, and these are some good breadcrumbs too, right?
Right, and sometimes they lead us right where we need to, and in all fairness, sometimes they don't, but it's a great start.
It is, which leads us into one of your best assets for, other than Vorys and Denise, of course, one of your best assets is Google and how to use Google. And what we're going to talk about now, when doing Google searches, there's a lot of tools you can go in and you can put a phone number in. And that is on my checklist that I can send out to everybody after the webinar if you request that. And there's tools that I use, but I think when you say Google is probably your favorite way to just dump a phone number in?
Yeah, I prefer Google out of all of the other ones.
And you've actually educated me on this, because I used to go to Google as maybe my 3rd or 4th search, because I would dump it in a few other different areas. But what Denise has shown me over the years is that when I would put a phone number in, I would get a very generic result. And sometimes you've got a 10-digit phone number, and it's showing you pieces and parts of it. So Denise has showed me that if we go and put asterisks around it and search, we get exact matches, correct?
Right. If you put the quotes around it and you search, it's more defined in what you're looking for. And by throwing the number in Google before you choose specific databases, there's a pretty good chance that you're going to pull up everywhere it is anyways, and then you can move forward looking through all of those hits that you received. So that's why I prefer Google. Now, but with that being said, there are times that I will also use Bing, because Bing may give me some other information.
Yes.
And so especially when I'm stuck or pieces are not lining up, I may throw it in Bing, or I may change how I search it. A phone number, there's not a lot of changing up that you can do.
That's true.
But when you use other things, you can change it up and how you put it in there. So you just got to play with it.
And that's important. A lot of things is more playing and making a few changes and adjusting one little thing here and there. And you brought up a good point with Bing. in all the investigations I've done, a lot of times if I run a search, and again, Google is by far probably the more accurate for a lot of the data, but if I don't find something there, I've done tricks where I'll look at maybe Safari on my smart device, because that is going to give me a different search results. Bing and Yahoo can give you different search results. Maybe it's not better, but again, you're looking for a breadcrumb. And there has been times where getting frustrated, leaning back at my desk, I grab my phone, type that phone number into Safari, and I get a different search result, and it just leads me down a different path that may be something or may not.
Right,
correct?
Right. And all these things just take a few minutes. That's the other thing about it.
Yeah, and again, that's a good point when you talk about a few minutes here, because a lot of times if you're conducting an investigation, you usually will either find somebody in, let's say, 20 or 30 minutes, or it's going to be a much longer investigation because you've done a good job.
Right.
Well, yeah.
So, Ryan, I see your question about using Spokio for phone numbers. I'm not a big fan. The reason being is I find that their information is not as accurate or up to date as some other places. So I may use it, or it may come up in my Google search, but I don't specifically go there because I personally feel that their information is not as accurate. There are different paid sites that you can use as well, but so much of and everything we're talking about today is everything that you can freely find on the internet, but I personally am not, Spokio is not on the top of my list.
Yeah, and again, some of those sites, and even some of the ones that I've used white pages before, and I do like white pages, but you have to take a lot of that with kind of a grain of salt, because it's not as updated as you think. You get almost a false sense of success when you see a phone number that may be there tied to an address and then find out it's 8 years old, where Google will give you something a little bit more accurate because the relevance rating is going to be higher.
Right, and I can add this piece to it. I know that what I can do as an investigator is very different than what you can do being in a law firm, or other people have certain parameters they have to follow. I'm a huge fan of calling a phone number. I will call a phone number. I will call every single phone number that I find, and that is how I learn if they're good or bad numbers. So my advice when you're allowed to do it, or if you can't get an investigator to do it, is make the phone calls. When you have a phone number, use it. Getting somebody on the phone and catching them off guard is some of the best information that you can get. I have solved many investigations that way.
And that's a really good point, because I know that since joining the firm, one of my favorite things is making a phone call, maybe from my Skype, right, or something of that nature, where it's a little hidden, because you don't always want to talk to somebody. You may want to get the recording. Well, in the legal world, now that I work for a very large law firm, it's kind of called pretexting, and there's a few other things that kind of go on there that I can't do. But as the brand, you can do those. You can place those phone calls. I would probably recommend, I think you told me this last night, try to do it as anonymous as possible, though, right?
Right, and I will tell you this from experience, *67 doesn't always work. It does allow them to call you right back. They may not know the number, but they can call you right back. So if you're going to do that, at least be quick on your feet. I prefer I call it a burn phone. Hey, you pay for the number. So I just know I have a lot more leeway than you do. But for people that do, use the phone, but don't use your personal one.
Yeah, I don't think I could say burn phone. I might have somebody upstairs come down and talk to me.
We'll call it pay as you go.
There you go. Okay, so another really interesting tool, and there's a little misconception here. So one thing I want to clarify. A lot of people have heard me on past webinars talking about search logos, search images within Google. Well, there's been a lot of confusion there, because a lot of people are actually trying to go just in the regular search tool and search it and then go to the image button. Well, Denise, you kind of told me very much that that's not it, and I need to stop saying that. So
I was going to say, how does that work for you?
Yeah, not so well. So why don't you tell me what I've been preaching wrong out there for a while?
So you have to go to Google Images. You can't just go to Google. You have to go to Google Images. So I think your next slide is Google Images. On Google, it says images underneath. You can search by image. You have an option to either put a website in or drag an image. I drag images. I drag images from online marketplaces. So if they have a logo, I drag that image in there. I drag pictures in there. Anything that I can drag and put in there that I think may give me some information, I do it. Sometimes you get nothing. Sometimes you get a whole lot of stuff that doesn't mean anything. Social media pictures, if you think that you have the right one, are almost some of the best to put in there because you find them other places. But it's another one of those quick tools. Try it especially with logos to see what else pops up. But make sure you're in Google Images. Don't just go to Google.
Yeah, and that's important. And if for a lot of people on the phone here, when they're looking at some of these marketplace storefronts, both the auction sites as well as these top marketplaces, they have logos next to their store name. Whether they're a really basic logo, but that is something you can drag and drop, because even in my experience and those first couple slides, that was an investigation that I conducted. You were able to connect those two marketplaces, if you will, different seller names a little bit, but the image and logo said they're the same, and then that also brought up some of the other things that we'll talk about with the social media and some of that. So
right.
It's a very powerful tool when used correctly, and when I finally tell everybody the correct way to use it. Okay. So is that okay? Did I do good on that one?
You did.
Okay.
Just even if you go to Google and put in Google Images in the bar, it'll take you there.
Okay. Another tool that is out there free and for everybody to use is marketplace polls. Now, when I first started doing investigations pretty heavily over the last couple of years, marketplace polls didn't really lead me in a lot of the directions because I was looking at it a little bit different. And again, consulting with Denise over the years, she's kind of helped me out. Working with Whitney and the team here at Vorys, really started looking at the different aspects of marketplace polls and what to look for. Okay, so maybe there's some things that you could point out here and on the next slide, Denise, that maybe I was missing over the years that you've even enlightened me on.
So the biggest things I look for here, and you can run auction sites in here and marketplace sites in here. I look for, you can basically put the seller name in the search bar and it will pop up, and it will kind of tell you sometimes where they're located, how long they've been doing it. Not that I really care about that as much. The other thing I look for is it will list their previous seller names. There are some marketplaces that are not as easy to find the seller name as it is with the auction websites. This is a pretty good one because if they know it, it's in there. So it just gives you another thing to search, just like this one. His username, or his old username was Weston4826.
Yeah.
So again, I look at that, and that's pretty specific to that person. Yeah. And chances are they probably have done other things using that username. So the biggest things I look for is their previous names and where they're located.
Yeah, and that's really important because you can always reverse search. Now, a lot of times when you are doing the Google search like we talked about a few slides ago, marketplace polls will be one of the first results that come up. So it'll show you here. Well, now reverse that a little bit. So now if this came up during your Google search or marketplace, now take that, as Denise said, and let's look at the previously known as. And let's see if we can associate that with maybe another type of marketplace or another type of seller. So there is good information. And again, knowing where they're based out of or knowing where it's shipping from or some of those, again, take it with a grain of salt. It's not 100% accurate, but it's a good piece of information that's guiding you down that path, right?
Right, and the other thing, it doesn't show you, a lot of times you'll find out if they're new sellers, which you can find that on Amazon or on the other marketplaces as well. But you'll see a lot of them that pop on and off, on and off. It gives you an idea of kind of what they're doing in fishing, and probably aren't going to stay there very long when they have a habit of that.
Exactly, and sometimes the ones that pop on and off really quickly, or the feedback says they've only been around, they've only sold 10 items, that takes a little diligence, for us, the investigators, to go, okay, how far do we want to go down? He's got 4 products for sale. Is this something we want to monitor, or is it somebody we really want to go down the path and spend all the time and effort on? Maybe we just move on, right? I've even consulted, and this is my whole, I don't like to negotiate with terrorists kind of a thing, but sometimes if there's 1 or 2 products, I'd say just buy them. Buy the products, get them off there. Not only will you remove the 2 products, but you'll capture a lot of information there, you'll get rid of the inventory, and that could be a way to go. Now again, I'm not encouraging that, but sometimes when it's only 1 or 2, maybe it's better to spend $100 buy the product. You're going to capture a lot of information, and you're not spending hundreds of dollars or a lot of hours investigating it.
Well, and sometimes they're also fishing to see if they can get away with it.
That's
so a
right.
simple email to them or a message to them will make them stop. So I don't pay a lot of attention to those ones.
Well, social media. One of the things that I find very interesting about social media is it's kind of a human trait that the longer you're getting away with something, maybe the more you're going to brag about it, or you're going to somehow lead it or tell somebody about it or something of that nature. Now, in this case, that's not exactly what happened. We got another slide we'll talk about here where they are talking about that a little bit. But here, when this is an investigation that I conducted, I ran that image search, and I was able to pull up their social media page. And once I pulled up the social media page, all the information started becoming. So now, not only did I have two marketplaces, now I had a social media site that all I'm doing at this point now is validating data, right?
Right. And I love social media pages because if you'll see even in the corner, often you get an address, a phone number, an email. So it provides a lot of information.
Exactly. Exactly. So now we go into one, and you showed me this slide just a few days ago, and I think this is important because this goes to what you were saying earlier a little bit about people kind of creature of habit, right?
Right. So this is a good example where I used the username that I had found on another marketplace. It was a previous seller name that was used, and I put it in Google and got some hits, and one was a dating site. So this is one of them. I found other ones, and it provided me with his first and last name, and another one I found out that he was a Leo. So I'm going to guess that his birthday is 8/4 and not 4/8, or there's some correlation there. It also provided me with pictures that I could Google image.
But let's back up a little bit.
Yes.
If everybody recalls about 3 slides ago, the former username on that marketplace, under marketplace polls, was his Snapchat name, right?
Yes, it's the Snapchat name, and then he changed it to something wholesale.
Yeah, little something, and so there you go. You were able to search that and found this, and then, you know, I can't remember. Did you actually reach out to him to try to get a date or something, and then, you know, bring a burn phone?
No. But it linked to his Facebook page. I was able to find his Facebook page, his LinkedIn page. He's on a couple of dating sites. He's not very well hidden. I can tell you where he spent 4th of July as well.
Yeah, sometimes Denise scares me, by the way. So sometimes if I don't return her call quick enough, she goes, hey, what were you doing up in Cascade? So now we talked a little bit about one of the tools that I've used quite a bit. Again, you take it with a grain of salt, but it is a paid search. It's not very expensive. By all means, I'm not here reselling the service or anything, but White Pages has done a lot. If someone's been in a place for a long time and has that, White Pages has been a really good resource for me. Again, more for validating the data, less than researching, right? Because you got to have a good piece of data to put in here to search. And in this instance, I was able to search a phone number that I was able to acquire from the social media webpage, dumped it in here, and then I started seeing, you know, different things. I started seeing, you know, his marketplace sites were shipping from Maryland. Next thing you know, he had his initials on his logo fell in line with his name and the phone number. Now I'm literally building the case, if you will. Right?
Right. And I'm going to add something. I don't think we have a slide about it, but I'd like to mention it. On this one, you found an address. I really like to do property record searches with addresses, especially in a lot of, you have to do a search, find out what county they are in, go in that county assessor's office, and it will give you a good idea if they still live there because you can get their property records. So I'm a huge fan of taking addresses and running their property records.
I think that's a good point, and one of the reasons why the slide's not in here was that property record of that image, and I really wanted to show it to everybody, but it gave every piece of information on that person. A little bit too much, and by the time we got done trying to edit that slide, for all you folks on the webinar today, it was a blur, okay? Now, what was interesting, we can say, is when we looked at that ID history on the auction site, and we saw Rick and 45 and some of that. That was that slide, right?
Yes.
And it verified he was Rick and he was 45, and wasn't his last name a variation?
I'll just say his last name had the word Warren in it. So I literally sent that around my office and said, this is why you should be careful of what your usernames are, and gave that as an example of, from his username, this is what I found.
Yes.
And I had a phone number and a cell phone number.
So it was a compelling site, and it was a compelling search. So again, after the webinar, my contact information will be there. We'll send a follow-up. If you want any of these specific sites, please feel free to reach out to us after. We'll provide all the information to try to, again, we're here to help you conduct your own investigation to be better at solving these issues. For when you need us, we're definitely here. So again, as we're going down this list, this is usually what I would say is kind of my last checkbox is, let's conduct a product buy. Now, product buys, please understand, there's two types of product buys. There's a product buy to ID somebody, part of an investigation, but a lot of times there's a product buy then to verify the product itself. Serial numbers, lot numbers, that then will help track a distribution possibly. In this case, we're talking about conducting a product buy because maybe some of those other search results that we were searching was not conclusive enough, right, Denise? So we go and we conduct a product buy. Now, the one thing that I want to really emphasize when looking at product buys, you know what, I'm actually going to back up one slide here a little bit because I want to talk about when you're doing a product buy, you want to make sure that it's not fulfilled by the marketplace you're buying, because then what you're really, unless you know it's going to have maybe a packaging slip or a lot number or serial number you're trying to verify, if it's fulfilled by that specific marketplace, you're going to run into a distribution point. That's not going to lead you anywhere. Now you're going to either be further frustrated. However, when it's not fulfilled, you gather a piece of information, and I would say the majority of the product buys I end up conducting, whether it be on the marketplace or the auction site, has led me to be able to send an enforcement, correct?
Right. And I'll add this part of it. When you're making a product buy to obtain their contact information, it doesn't matter what you buy.
Oh, yeah, the cheapest product. As an old colleague of mine used to say, I'll buy chapstick, you know, because you don't necessarily have to buy the product of your product or a product of your clients. You just want to get sometimes the lowest cost product. And there's times when you identify a third-party seller and the majority of it is fulfilled by that marketplace or one of the primes that are out there, go look through his whole store. Take a minute and look at his inventory, and odds are you'll find a product or two that are in there that are not fulfilled by the marketplace by those products, correct?
That is correct. And then one step further, and I may be jumping in front of myself, I know one thing I do, especially as working for a brand, is, you know, we have some of our customers that sell on the marketplaces that aren't supposed to, but they don't sell under the customer name I have. So I can run the customer name through my database and it doesn't pop up. But when I have an address, and maybe I even found it elsewhere, I can run that through my customer database and find who they really are. So that is the other thing, as a brand, put this information through your database of customers.
Yes.
Because I have found a lot of information that way.
Yes. It's, you know, I don't know what the statistics are today. I haven't been running investigations as aggressively as I have in the past, but there was a time where I very comfortably could say half of the investigations came back and it was an authorized seller selling under a different entity or a different name or some variation of it because they were trying to move that product out of their inventory. Now, I'm not talking about very large or you know, and again, whether they're doing it in bad faith or whatever, that's for the brand to decide. But that's where the investigation comes into play, knowing where it's being shipped from. You only have one reseller in Chesapeake, and all of a sudden, you know, you're selling, you know, you're a direct seller, and you have one reseller there, and that's where all the product's moving from. Start putting those pieces together, right? I always envision some of the stuff that you and I've done in the past, those old FBI movies, right, where you look and you see all the little charts going down, but they're all leading to one person. That's a little bit of what we're doing here.
Right.
Okay, so what do you do when you do a product buy? Well, If you do a product buy and you pay for it, a lot of times you can acquire the information there. So here is a PayPal instance. Now, back in the day, if we go back maybe 6-7 years ago, PayPal used to provide a lot of information. Because they're a financial institution, they would provide you with names, phone numbers, addresses, a lot of different things. It's pulled back a little bit. However, that being said, in this instance, I was able to obtain a website address. Now, the website address can lead me to do a reverse search on that website address and then gather information as well. As you can see, I bought a very inexpensive product, had it shipped, gathered that email, gathered that web URL, but I was able to do one other thing that a lot of people need to really think about. For that auction site we talked about, there's a process called, I believe it's called a PIA, which is a personal information acquisition. It's a request. Okay. If you've conducted a transaction with a seller, you can then go through there and request that seller's information. Is that correct?
Yes, but remember, when you request that seller's information, they get your information.
Yes, they do.
So another reason why you don't necessarily want to do this from your personal accounts that you use, because they get your information.
Yes, and it comes in an email. So this is a screenshot right here, but this is a screenshot of an email that has come in. So now they have your information, you have their information. So if you're doing a constant requests like this to an auction site, they're receiving this information as well. But what did I acquire? I acquired a phone number, which validated that again, and then I also acquired Maryland, that verified it again, along with that seller name, which then verified it back to another marketplace. It was then a very compelling investigation. Now, with these examples that we're showing today, in this case, we really were true building a case. So we gathered as much information across the board. For a lot of brands that are on the phone today, you might not need to go this far. You don't have to go through the product buyer and some of this. If you had that information just through the social media page, right, Denise? Right. That's enough for you, and you work for a brand now, right? As brand protection director, that would be more than enough for you, right?
Right. It gives you the information to send a letter, at least a starting point.
Start the conversation.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
See if they'll fall in compliance or where you need to escalate that. Okay, and this goes to the point. So during that transaction I had on the auction site, I was able to run a reverse history. I didn't find much information on it because the domain name was inactive and it was an old one, but it still shows you can now run that. And a lot of times there's what everybody's probably familiar with, a who is history. That tells you who owns the domain name today. Unfortunately, probably 60, 70%, or I don't even know what the exact number is, or privacy protect, right?
Right. But yeah. Some of the older ones, or people that have been around for a while, didn't think to protect theirs. So it is good to go through the history,
yes,
to see what you find. And also sometimes, I believe in some of them, you can see old screenshots of the website, which will also provide identifying information that they may have removed after they, for whatever reason.
And that's actually a good point. So there's a who is history, which is what we're looking at right here. But if you look over to the bottom left, I like to call that the who was history. Right. Because a lot of times when someone registers a domain name, they're just thinking that's a great business idea, let's go grab that, let's do something quickly, and they just register. Then they go back later and change it. There's two pieces, and I started my career in this business, in the brand protection business 17 years ago in the domain world, right? I was very early on with one of the premier brand protection companies. And what's important to look here is if the creation date and the expiration date has not changed, odds are the domain name has never changed ownership. So that's what you look for when you're looking for the who was, because those two pieces of information cannot be changed or altered. If they are changed and altered, usually it's expired, went to redemption, went out to the public, then was re-registered. Now, does that mean it could not be sold and then transferred through escrow to somebody else? No. But again, it's giving you a piece of information that you can then kind of crawl through. So it's important. Now, this is Domain Tools, which is a great service to use to kind of go through there. It limits you to how much searches you can do, but there's other services. Is there any other services that you like to use?
You can use Whoisology. There's a free form of it that will give you some of the information you need. It's always a good start before you start paying for anything. Use everything that's free that's out there.
That's right. There's another service that's out there that's free. a lot of people don't know about. Denise touched a little bit. Domain Tools will give you a little brief snapshot of what that website looked like. But there's a neat tool out there that's been archiving the website for quite some time, right?
You're talking about the Wayback Machine?
The Wayback Machine, yeah. So the Wayback Machine, I was doing an investigation for one of our cosmetic clients, and the URL was down, everything. I was able to go to the Wayback Machine, go back, look at that domain name, a couple years back, and the contact information was right there. And there you go, right? And the domain name was privacy. So the Wayback Machine does really well. And again, we're going very quickly through here, and a lot of questions are popping up. All these will be answered either during or right after. And these URLs that we're mentioning and these services that we're mentioning to help with investigations, again, reach out to us after, and we'll be sure to share those with you. Okay, so now, one of the things that I did, I think it was 3 or 4 months ago, because of the amount of investigations that I was doing, and I think Denise was helping me with a few, and we're going through, we were looking at state registrations when we find a business name. And it's amazing how you can do so many investigations in your career, and you end up going to Google and typing in Florida Secretary of State, and then clicking there, and then you go to the business search, then you got to go to the LLC search. Well, what I did a few months back, I created a one-page document, all 50 states, all links to all of them. I'll share that with everybody after the call. If you request that from me, I'll give that to you. But it's important to search these types of things. You want to expand maybe a little bit on that, Denise?
It is important because it will give you additional information, or it can confirm what you already know. I also like to, if somebody is in Ohio and I don't find them in Ohio, I will tend to also search them in Florida, Nevada, I think Delaware may be a popular one,
yep.
that people don't live in, but they tend to register their companies,
yep.
Where they tend to register. So it can, and each Secretary of State will provide different information. Mm-hmm. I believe in Texas you may even have to pay $1 to get the information. I think
there's like 4 states that I found that are a pay.
Right.
But you're right, they're not expensive.
No, but it's another, especially now that you have all the links down, yeah. It's another quick tool that is, for the most part, free, that will help you verify the information.
I think we have it on desktops just sitting there anymore, because you just want a quick go. When you see, as we're talking about, you're looking at that seller's information or About Us page, and they collect sales tax in Colorado. Oh, let me go search Colorado for a few variations of that. So that's why it's important. And knowing that they're still active and they're still conducting business. So let's summarize, because we're coming up here. We got about 10 more minutes. And sometimes when we get in these conversational and kind of what we call workshop webinars, you can stretch out the time here, as I'm doing right now. So the summary is, let's search all aspects of the marketplace, the About Us page, the seller feedback. That's your first step. You've identified an unauthorized sale or offering out there. Let's dig through every aspect of that. Feedback is a big one. Sometimes people complain, right? And they'll complain like, I called Denise at 213-490, and she was a jerk. Well, that's in the feedback, and now you got a phone number and Denise, right?
Or sometimes I've gotten tracking numbers. So then I didn't have a city or a state, and I could then put the tracking number in.
That's a great point. A lot of times when you do a product buy, always take a look at that tracking number, because United States Postal Service, FedEx, UPS, you find the zip code of origin.
That's right.
And that's actually really good. Again, research seller information within the search engines, research the marketplace and review sites. Social media is a big one. Reverse names, conduct the product buys, one of the last resorts unless there's a reason you're really doing that. A domain name search and the state business registration.
Let me add one thing that we didn't touch when I do search engine searches. So, and I think there's some people on the phone that probably know me because I reached out to them. When I search a seller's name, I sometimes will find PDFs or other do not call lists that other manufacturers have put out there. And I pick up the phone and I call that manufacturer or that brand, and I explain to them who I am and ask them what information that they have. And have found that sometimes, especially the difficult ones, coming together and working on something, it helps both of us. Sometimes you find their information and it's not making sense because it's not what you found, so I call them and ask them, where did your information come from? But use your colleagues.
yes.
Especially when you find some of that out there. I mean, that saved me several times.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And again, what we're really trying, and what we tried to do today, and I hope everybody found it to be beneficial, is just we want to empower you to do as much work as you can on your own. It's not always about just call David and he's going to charge you money just to do every investigation. No, we want to be here, Denise, myself, others that are on the call here. They're your colleagues. They're your industry experts that can help you do these types of things on your own. When you get to that point and you get to that roadblock, that's where you want to call and say, I've exhausted this, can you help out? And sometimes another set of eyes can find something fairly quickly, right? But going back to the beginning, I think one of the most important things, and I can't emphasize this enough, is what I've learned over the last year, spending time with the entire team here at Vorys, is there is a way to truly enforce your brands, your products on these marketplaces. And it all starts with creating the legal grounds in the beginning to enforce on it. So now when you identify these people, you identify these sellers, you now have legal grounds under a material difference argument in many aspects to shut that site down, to get that seller off, to have a claim. It starts with a cease and desist letter. That's a type of enforcement that everybody's common and aware of. And I've got an email right here. Do we have templates of cease and desist? And, Philip, we do. And there's things like that we can work with you on. But there's escalated levels of enforcement where we've seen even draft complaints. Now, a lot of times that scares a lot of people when working with a law firm, thinking, oh, a draft complaint, that's cost thousands and thousands of dollars. Well, draft complaint is really a cease and desist letter on steroids. But it is a document that is X versus Y, and it kind of scares them, and they receive that. And there's other things we can do. We could, subpoena marketplaces for seller information if need be. There's other levels of legal ramifications or remedies that you can then have that pushes that unauthorized seller to get them to move down. So there's a lot of questions coming on, and unfortunately we've only got about 5 minutes left here. So I think we'll go through a few of these, and let me see how to read some of these. Okay, so let's see here. So Betsy, you asked if there's any international tools. I think, Denise, you're probably better because you work with a lot of international clients. I have not expanded much in the international realm.
So, and I think I saw another question there asked, there are some marketplaces that are international. Mm-hmm. And somebody had mentioned this as one of the questions or comments. And I think it's good to point out that when you search that seller name on some of the other international marketplaces, you will find more information because it's definitely more transparent. So as for international tools, especially if it is out of the country, I always start with a Google search, and that will lead me to other tools. I have found Chinese business records that way. I have found addresses. One time I solved an international one and found the seller because somehow I got a hold of, it was on the internet and I hid it somehow. It was a list that must have been sold on the dark web somewhere, but I ended up finding the person's name, address, phone number, and their credit card information. It was expired from this list because sometimes I'll search and put plus.pdf in it to see if I can pull PDFs. So I don't use specific international tools. I always start with a Google search and see where that takes me.
But you can also Google, because Google results are going to vary by country, so you can do google.co.uk.
Correct. So that's a good starting place. And then you will find other tools like I think I've showed you the customs.
Transshipping and customs information.
Yes, it will give you some pretty good information as well.
Okay, great. So Amy asked a question here and said, have you had any luck finding resellers on a specific marketplace who hide behind the fulfillment or the fulfilled buy? Well, I'm going to say that my answer is yes, because the majority of them are, right, anymore. That's happening.
Right, but you're not going to find, in all fairness, you're not going to find all of those.
Yes.
I will say back when I was doing a lot more of these seller investigations on a regular basis, we had a 76% success rate with ones that it was fulfilled by the warehouse. Amazingly enough, sometimes a simple email asking them questions, they will give you some additional contact information even though they're not supposed to. I actually had a seller once provide their name, address, and phone number. Now, that doesn't happen very often, but you can ask.
Yeah.
So if you do, it's usually having a conversation with them is where you're more likely to, or you might want to keep watching their marketplace site because today you may check it and they may have nothing that isn't fulfilled by them.
Well, let me say one thing too on the fulfillment side. And again, this is when I first joined the firm. I was doing an investigation. I was so frustrated because I couldn't find anything that I was really, 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 really upset, and I hit return, and I was done. And then all of a sudden, I got an email with their phone number and everything for the return.
Right.
It solved it. It was a fulfillment product that I received, didn't lead me anywhere, and then I got that information from return. Now, really can't be doing that, as a firm, but as you on the call, you can do those types of things where if you want to return, don't want to abuse that, right?
Right.
So we'll move on. We only have 3 minutes here real quick. So, right here, Eva, we're talking about calling neighboring business. I think this is one of Denise's favorite things to do. Unfortunately, the firm, as Denise said, I can't due to pretexting a few other things, but go ahead.
Eva, I have actually done this as well, especially in strip malls. I had one where the individual had been doing a lot of lying, but everything lined up to this person. And I just couldn't get that smoking gun, but I knew in my gut of guts it was this person. So I did the same thing. I then found a business next door and told them that I was trying to send them something, I just started asking questions and got that information, but it is a very good thing to do. I'm telling you, when you can use it and if you can't, hire somebody that can. The phone is your best friend.
Yes.
Especially if you're quick on your feet. If you're not quick on your feet and you have to think it all out, you should not be the one making the calls.
Exactly. So, Ali, can you employ us if you need to do an in-depth investigation? Absolutely. Feel free to reach out to me. We're more than willing to kind of walk you through that process and see if we can help you out there. One person asked, can I share Denise's contact information? I think you're okay with that, aren't you, Denise?
Yes, share my LinkedIn.
I think we'll share that. So if you reach out to me, I'll be sure to get that out. And then one last question, then we got to close up here. When making calls, this is from Diane, when making calls to phone numbers, what questions do you ask and in what order? So I'm going to answer really quickly here. On me, I actually sometimes, Diane, I like to hear a voicemail. I like to hear a recording message. I want to hear some of that leaves me information because I don't really want to talk to them. But I know, Denise, you take a different approach a lot of times.
I like the voicemail as well, but I like to talk to them, and it depends. It depends on if I made a buy from them and I want to return it. So it all depends. Sometimes I have literally called and asked them if they were, such and such marketplace seller. And if you catch them off guard, they will answer you. And sometimes they ask me things like, where did you get my phone number? And I was like, it was on the page. And they don't have time to go back and look at their page or look somewhere else to see if I'm telling them the truth. And I have them on the phone. And I tend to answer their questions with my question.
Well, that's good.
It just depends on the situation and what evidence you kind of already have and know.
Well, great. Well, again, Denise, I can't thank you enough for not only participating and helping me over the years with investigations, but also coming up and spending this time here in Columbus with us. I hope everybody on the webinar was able to have some information, some good takeaways. Again, my information is on the screen there. Please feel free to reach out to me. I'll send you the list of state registration. I'll send you the checklist of investigations. And I really am here. If everybody knows me well enough, knows that I'm here to help answer questions, here share industry information. It's all about a big network to solve the overall problem, and that's what we're here for. We're here to help you succeed and then protect. So that's what our goal is. So again, thank you for joining us today, and have a great day.